This is iFretless Sax, one of 3 iFretless apps that we have currently. When we're using iFretless apps, any iFretless app, you'll notice that it has 2 controls that control the loudness of the sound. The first one is labeled velocity, and the second one is the volume. Let me explain first what velocity is, because volume is reasonably obvious, but velocity may not be. When you're playing on this touch screen, you can press very gently and you'll get a softer sound and a gentler tone, or you can press much harder and you'll get a harder, louder sound. So there are 2 components to this loudness of the sound. The first component is how much electricity you're putting through the speakers or the headphones, and that's more or less controlled by the volume. But there's another component to the loudness, and that's the tone of the sound. If you listen to this again, here's a soft chord. Here's the same chord played much harder. There's a real difference in tone there, and the reason for that is multi-sampling. The sounds that you're hearing in these iFretless apps are produced by a relatively simple method that we're actually recording real instruments, and each note you play is playing back a recording. But each note that we've sampled from a real instrument has been sampled not once but 9 different times. So when the musicians go into a recording session to make an iFretless app, if they're playing a C, for example, they play it once and then they play it a little bit louder again, and a little bit louder, and louder yet, until they get to the maximum volume of the instrument. And each one of those notes at a different loudness, it's not just a louder sound, but it's a different tone in the sound, and we want to capture that, and that's one of the reasons why iFretless apps sound quite realistic, and that's also the reason why they take a lot of megabytes on your hard drive. But there are cases where we don't want the full range of tone. So let's say I'm playing a rock and roll song on the tenor sax, and I want to mostly just blow that sax as hard as I can blow it. So I can take this minimum velocity and raise it up, and what I'm doing is I'm actually cutting down the number of samples that I'm going to use. So rather than using all 9 samples from the softest to the loudest, I'm going to use just the top 2 samples, or 2 or 3 samples in the upper end of the volume range. And I've done the same thing with the volume here. I've put the minimum volume up, so now when I play this saxophone, I get a real full loud sound on every note, and that's even if I don't press hard, I still get that. On the other hand, some people want a nice breathy soft sound. Let's listen to this alto sax. Very soft and gentle, but when you're playing, you may find you have trouble controlling your fingers, and you may sometimes get some loud notes in there when you weren't intending it. Suppose I'm sure I just want those breathy sounds and I'm not interested in the loud ones. I can just limit the velocity down to the bottom end of the range, and now I'm going to get always those soft sounds, and even if I press hard, it'll be louder, but it won't get those harsh sounds. I might want to go a little further and say, not only do I just want those soft sounds, but I want to keep all those soft sounds within a small volume range. I'll get a little softer yet. Let's take it right down to nearer to the bottom. That's pretty close to the bottom. So now I've got the volume limited to a very narrow range, and that takes away my dynamics, but it gives me a very consistent volume, which you often want when you're recording. And I've totally cut out all the louder sounds out of this sample, so I'm always getting this gentle, breathy tone, and it's always coming out at a loud, full volume. You'll notice when I go to a different instrument, the settings move automatically, and when I come back, it remembers the settings that I chose last time I was using that instrument. So that's a useful thing you can do with iFretless Sax. Let's have a look at what this looks like when we're in a different iFretless app. This is also quite important in iFretless guitar. If we're looking at an electric guitars, especially when you put overdrive on, don't have much volume range. And you can see by default we've set this electric guitar to have a very limited range right up near the top. The velocity is not limited, so when I play softly, I'm getting the sound of someone gently plucking the guitar, but the amp is still turned up right to the top. If I play it harder, you get a little more pick noise on the beginning, but the volume isn't changing much because I've compressed that volume down into this narrow range, and that's usually what you want for electric guitar. On an acoustic guitar, you're usually going to want the full range of sounds, which allows you to pick harder when you want to pick harder. Now here we are in iFretless Bass, and there are some real interesting things that you can do in iFretless Bass with this. Let's look at the slap bass. You can see, although the sound is called slap bass, it doesn't slap on every note. It slaps when you play it hard, and it doesn't slap when you play it softly. Now, if you wanted to play slap bass all the time, slapping on every note, like a Seinfeld theme song, you could do that. So what I've just cut out the bottom of the velocity range here, and I'm keeping only the hard slap notes. Another thing I really like to do with this slap sound is this slap sound has a very nice, some very nice samples of someone kind of gently tapping the strings with the thumb. And you might want to play those samples and not have to worry about controlling your pressure too carefully. And by doing this, I'm cutting out all those slap samples, and now I can just jam very comfortably. And it's more or less filtering out all of those samples that I'm not looking for if I'm looking for kind of a tapping style more than a slapping style. So that's the end of our tutorial about velocity and volume. You'll want to look into those two things, and you'll see that some of these instruments can put out some unexpected sounds, or some sounds that you didn't hear the first time you listened to them if you play with this velocity setting a bit more.